Albert, I can't thank you enough for being here today. Really appreciate your time. We're at the Center for Device Innovation at Texas Medical Center. If you don't mind to take a moment, introduce yourself and your role at Allotrope Medical.
Yeah, so I'm Dr. Albert Huang. You can call me Albert. I'm the founder and CEO of Allotrope Medical.
Fantastic, thank you. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of Allotrope Medical, I want to talk about you for a little bit.
Sure.
So did you develop an interest in engineering and technology at an early age, or was there a significant event in your life that led you into medical devices?
Yeah. So when I was younger, I used to love taking things apart and hopefully putting them back together. So everything from working on guitar effects pedals to working on little Lego and kit models. So it was always inherent to me to try to understand how things worked and what made them work, even if they had a nice, clean outer shell. So I think from a young age, I like to do all these things, and that naturally transitioned into medicine, understanding the human body and kind of how we work inside and how we tick. And that was a very natural move then into medical device innovation and really solving the problems that were happening within the human body and when we worked in the operating room.
Absolutely. Yeah. Nothing's more complex than the human body.
That's very true.
So I can see it's an engineer's dream. Were you in an environment that fostered that kind of creative engineering mentality?
I was lucky enough to have parents that really just let myself and my brother more or less do what we wanted to. So if they saw us really liking things in chemistry, they would buy us chemistry kits when you used to be able to buy them. We would build things like potato guns or things along those lines. So there was always a constant opportunity to create things from parts that you find in the hardware store, for example.
Using unusual materials?
Yeah, random things, PVC pipes sometimes, or in the terms of the potato gun, using gas lighters and maybe slightly dangerous things, but at least I was under my dad's supervision. So
you were a creator, but a safe creator.
Yes, most of the time, I would say. Nothing catastrophic comes to mind.
Yet.
Yet.
So as I understand it, you were in the Methodist Hospital System as a Medical Device Innovation Fellow. How has that influenced your innovator path?
So I was really fortunate that as I was doing my general surgery training, got to take some time off while still being in the Department of Surgery, where they also let me sort of work on things that I thought were interesting. So the department chair, who's also the president of American College of Surgeons, Barbara Bass, was extremely supportive of seeing me as somebody that was always asking questions, always trying to solve problems, and saying, well, you can take this time now and do that. You've built these lists of issues and problems that you've seen in the OR. Why don't you spend some time and work on those? So this was an opportunity to really foster that and give me a chance to grow into the startup company that we have right now.
Well, it sounds like to me you're taking every opportunity that's coming your way.
I try to.
The only thing that you can do to really be the strongest innovator possible.
Absolutely.
See the opportunity, seize the opportunity, and make the best of it.
Absolutely.
So kind of shifting away from then, one of the questions that I always want to ask clinicians, not all MDs become innovators.
Right.
So what was that catalyst that made you going from a clinician setting into device innovation? What made you feel like you wanted to make that transition or have that dual role?
Yeah. So as I started my surgical training and even in medical school, I would look at the way we were taught the information in a different way. Everybody kept saying, this is how it's done, this is how we've always done it. I would always look at it and say, well, if you have this issue that you're always complaining about, why have you or why has nobody else done something about it? So I started building lists of things that I saw as problems in the operating room or things in the hospital. And especially in the operating room now, we have so many, I call them toys, but more like pieces of high-end equipment or complex machinery. And sometimes you would get a lot of complaints or things wouldn't work or it wouldn't do exactly what you wanted it to do. So I would take notes on those and say, hey, is there a way for me to do something different? And that essentially became the genesis of Allotrope Medical.
Let's take that as a beautiful transition point, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So what exactly is the story behind Allotrope Medical? How did it come together?
Yeah, so this came together as probably many other surgical devices made by surgeons, if there are some, the late night in the operating room. This was one of many cases where we were taking out a patient's colon and doing it using minimally invasive approaches. So one of the things when I was working with the senior surgeon is that he was, using four-letter words, grunting, swearing, because we couldn't identify this structure called the ureter, which drains urine from the kidney to the bladder, because of the scar tissue, because of the bloody field, and it wasn't making the contractions that would let him know what it was. So all these stringy tissues, he couldn't tell what was what, and he couldn't move on with the case safely for the patient until he figured it out. So as I was watching this case and doing it with him, I looked at the anesthesiologist using the facial nerve stimulator to make the patient's cheek twitch, which they do to see if the paralytic agent works. And I thought, well, that's muscle and that works on electricity and it moves. So the ureter is also muscle. Why can't we use electricity to make that move? And it has a very characteristic worm-like contraction that would tell you exactly what it was. So after we finally finished that case safely for the patient, I went home and I went onto eBay and went to Radio Shack and bought little electronic parts and hacked together something that looks terribly ugly, but it did what it was supposed to do.
This is very reminiscent of Dr. Billy Cohn.
Yeah.
So you saw a problem during surgery,
Right.
and you immediately were able to develop a concept for how you're able to remove that problem in the future.
Right.
You went and found unusual materials, and you built it yourself.
Yes.
That's incredible. Would you mind describing the technology? It's a handheld device, as I understand it. Would you mind, at a 40,000-foot level, describing what that does?
Yeah, so just like kind of the one-sentence descriptor first of what we do at Allotrope Medical is we're advancing surgical precision using safe electrical stimulation. So our body has natural movements of digestion. The urinary tract moves urine from the kidney to the bladder with muscular movements that we personally don't control, what your body does. What we figured out is a way to give the physician control over those using specific electrical signals that in many ways mimics the body's nervous system. So we can generate digestive movements on demand. We can generate movements of the ureter on demand. And what this can tell you is it lets you know tissue functionality. It lets you identify the structure, even if it's hidden behind other tissues, so you don't accidentally injure it. So we're doing all those kinds of different things and using it both in and out of the operating room.
That's fantastic.
Cool.
Thank you.
Sure.
So what would you say then your most surprising aspect of the journey has been so far, from initial concept and the idea to seeing it come to fruition 2 days ago, and even including the J-Labs experience?
Yeah.
What has been the most surprising aspect of this?
I think the part that I'm constantly, as this is my first time through in an innovation pathway and doing a startup, I think what continues to surprise me is the concept and the technology is one thing, but there's so many human interactions that actually need to go into making it more than a company and getting visibility and gaining validation. So I've had to kind of step out of my comfort zone and having to talk with different doctors from around the US, around the world, to share the technology and talk about it, get their feedback. I think that aspect, marketing, market validation, and then all the kind of minutia that goes into managing a business, it was expected, but it was surprising at like how much of my time actually needs to be spent on that.
Well, I always say everything takes longer than you think it will.
Yes, very much so.
So I feel that one personally. I want to talk a little bit about Allotrope currently. What would you consider another recent milestone for Allotrope?
So I think the other recent milestone is that we made a switch of our technology from a standalone single-use device, which is what we had been working on for a long time, actually what I envisioned as the product in the beginning, to more recently switching to a generator base with multiple disposable tips that don't contain electronics. And we shifted to this model in part because that was optimal for our first in human study. But what I realized is as we try to apply the device and technology applications into different surgical fields, robotics use or endoscopic use or handheld or minimally invasive, that instead of building everything out, why don't we just change the tip of the device? It makes every case, the cost of using it a lot less, so then hospitals are more willing to use it and it makes more sense in our kind of cost-conscious healthcare system. And it keeps the company nimble. So if a surgeon says, oh, I wish I had a device, your technology to do this case. If none of these things work, it's very easy for us to build a tip that still ports our electrical signal. So that's a big shift for us to switch from a single-use disposable to more of like a razor blade business model. So that's been a lot of fun, although I have to carry a much bigger suitcase around of hardware, but that's okay.
Small price to pay.
Yeah, it's okay. Just another check-in.
How does that affect reimbursement? It has to affect it significantly to make you even more valuable.
Yeah. So we're looking into the reimbursement component. Probably one of the reasons that that I've been also excited about this shift is that our technology is like a lot of energy devices in the operating room. They don't have individual or independent reimbursement for use. So we needed to drive that cost down, right? Because the hospital ultimately eats that cost. So that was part of it. As we expand our use cases and the different tips, it is possible that we'll actually have something which has its own reimbursement, and we're looking into that right now. So,
best of luck.
Yes, thank you.
A question that I feel like our innovators don't usually get asked, what do you want out of a strategic partnership?
I think for me, it all goes back to why I started doing this, right? So as a physician, the whole reason that I went through medical school, went through medical training is I want to help other people, right? So for me, a strategic partnership would mean a broader reach for technology that I came up with that I see helping people, and I truly believe helps people and doctors. So having a strategic partnership means they have a broader reach. There's a much faster pathway to get into the operating rooms, get in physicians' hands, which means being able to help more patients. That's the whole reason I started this. So.
Oh, Albert, you're such an inspiration. Thank you for everything that you're doing, everything that's still yet to come. Very exciting.
Yeah.
Just to close out the interview, do you have any last thoughts, lessons learned, or anything you want to share with our audience?
Yeah. I would say if anybody that is a physician or in healthcare, just like people with my background, as I talk to all of them and about my technology, I've realized that everybody has ideas. Everybody has a lot of ideas, but there's a natural hesitancy to kind of step out of your comfort zone and to do something with it, right? And I hope that there'll be more people that do. I would love to serve as that example. I think inspiration is a little lofty, but I hope that people will say, hey, if they could do it, then maybe I could do it. And yes, there's sacrifices. There are risks that come with these things, but like everything else in life, like high risk has the potential for a high reward. There's an opportunity for greater satisfaction than doing what you do every day in, day out. So if somebody could look at myself or look at people like Billy and say, hey, this is an opportunity that they took, I have an idea, like maybe I should try to figure something out. Then I think the world will be a better place.
Well, I couldn't say it better myself.
Yeah.
Albert, thank you for your time. Yeah. Congratulations, and I'm going to keep a close eye on you.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.